Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 30th of March 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. Well, the weather in Plymouth is appalling. It's gone from being pretty reasonable with a bit of sunshine and those daffodils looking particularly attractive to grey skies, rain, cold, unpleasant. So that's all we're going to say on the weather front today. But we thought we would cheer you up because there is a particularly important poll, which is a petition, petition. Here it is. There's a petition to stop David Cameron from re-entering the country, and we think this is very worthwhile. So this was a report from the Metro. So David is Lanzarote, I think he is, having his beer and his holiday because he needs it. It's hard work, destroying the country. This is the state of the petition at the moment. It's up to about 35,000. Of course, it needs to go right up to 100,000 in order to get a proper debate. But it seems, what's the word? Laudable, I think.
Absolutely.
Okay, so do have a look at that. Do get your name on it. Mine is there. So let's see whether we can stop David coming back into the country as an undesirable. And if you think the petition system is all fair, well, this is the bad news, really, because there was a vote of no confidence in David Cameron a while ago, which got up to 199,387 signatures. But the Petitions Committee decided not to debate it. I can't understand why. But they thought, no, we don't want to debate that in Parliament. So if you want to have a look at the procedures, you can see it on the government's website. Nice little cartoon and a little video telling you all about it. But I did happen to just spot that apparently there's 11 people on the committee. It sort of works out 6 are Tories and 5 are others. So that seems a pretty fair process for doing nothing.
Well, they claimed in that case that parliamentary procedure prohibited them from calling a no confidence vote based on a petition. I think parliamentary procedure should be changed under those circumstances.
Well, I think we need to remove the politicians, Mike, and
maybe
then we can
should have a petition for that.
Indeed, we can start cleaning up the country.
Yeah.
Well, under the surface, criminal activity, of course, in Parliament, drug taking and the stealing of property. This brings us to the Tom Crawford case, and we've got Guy Taylor, audio only, unfortunately, today, as Guy's had some computer problems. But Guy, you're here. Thank you for joining us, and you're going to give us a bit of an update on Tom Crawford.
Yeah, Tom went back to the property on Sunday night, and was in the property. And of course, we've had, again, more people turn up and the police, etc. I mean, the bottom line is Tom knows that they haven't got any supporting documents for what they've actually done to him. So, all the documents from land registry to the warrant, the whole lot. And of course, when you steal someone's property, and Tom's not an isolated case, this is going on all over the United Kingdom. We've got people going in the same circumstances everywhere, but Tom is really highlighting this. What do you do? So what Tom's done is, Tom was decided that he was going to, by the sounds of it, he was going to commit a burglary. And that was why he went there. If they're saying it's not his property, then obviously he would have been burglarising it. So that's what the situation was. The police, there wasn't as many police as there was before, perhaps because they're not supporting the banks in this enterprise. But I was on the phone with the negotiator and Tom and the whole situation, and it got resolved fairly amicably after about 7 or 8 hours.
Guy, just to clarify what you're saying there, Tom is aiming to be charged with a criminal offence with a view to bringing documentation in front of a jury. Is that what he's aiming to do here?
Yes. Now, the situation was similar to, well, we had this similar all over the country in various ways, but the case was similar when they got on the rooftop. Of course, when they got on the rooftop and the case collapsed after a week at Leicester Crown Court for the Rooftop 7, they weren't able to produce the documentation that they were supposed to produce, i.e. the warrant that was alleged to have been used.
This is the warrant that was alleged to be used to take the property in the first place?
That's right. Yeah. So that they weren't able to produce that in the court, and the whole thing went away. Well, Tom's still in a position of thinking, here I am, I've had my home stolen. They haven't got any supporting documents in any departments of the court. We've checked the entire case man record. There's been no fee paid. The land registry documents don't support it. And of course, so someone's bought this property in at the very least bad faith. There's no good faith in buying that property, and no one can say that they didn't buy it knowing what they were letting themselves in for, as it were. But of course, he's saying it's still my property. So what do you do in those circumstances? You know, when you know that the civil courts are compromised to the extent that they are in this country, whenever a bank's involved, you're not going to get justice. You're going to be shown the red card. So he feels that the only way he can show this is by getting himself in the criminal court in front of a group of his peers, which he's wanted all along, and getting the whole matter resolved and showing them that there are no documentations to support the merit in what the bank and what the police and what the bailiffs, ultimately all these bodies have done to him.
I mean, I think it's quite interesting that he clearly considers that he has a strong enough case that he's prepared to take this risk, and it says something for his courage. I mean, we've seen quite a lot of criticism of Tom Crawford on the internet because people saying that he hasn't told the whole story, or he's just simply made a mistake. But the fact of the matter is, this problem hasn't gone away. He hasn't gone away, and he's absolutely standing up for himself. You've got to applaud that.
Oh, you've got to applaud it, Mike, and exactly. I mean, Brian told me about the article in the Nottingham Post, and it's almost like they've got cognitive dissonance. It's very nice that they're keeping a timeline and a story, and they're applying a narrative to it. You know, just exactly what the narrative is one thing, but no one's asking the question why. You know, why is a man who's worked all his life, he's never been in trouble, him and his whole family are an honest, you know, bunch of people that have a strong working family, honest. Why is this happening? Why would this man be doing this? Why won't they address that question? Why? It's all very well putting the timeline and the story out and applying a narrative to it, but the narrative's not much good if you're not asking the question why. And of course, anyone who has asked why has been shown that the documentation doesn't support what's happened, and that this isn't an isolated case. Tom will be the first to tell you it's not about him. He's trying to expose this for everybody, because you know they're coming for everybody, and they are. We've got people ringing up every single day of the week on the same issue, and you know he's a brave man, and he's prepared to do what he says on his tin, and he wants this resolved, and he wants it resolved in front of 12 of his peers, not an isolated judicial machinery that's just been going their own way and not actually applying the law in these matters. So yeah, why has this happened? Why is he doing it? And let's get to the root of it. So if he's able to go in front of a jury and show what he's saying is correct, then you know he feels that he would be satisfied, and it would be on the public record for him.
Guy, of course, thank you for that. Of course, the other thing is that the Nottingham Post, as you say, simply does not do the investigative journalism to look into the key issues of these documents, what took place in court. They skate over it exactly as they've done with the child abuse situation in Nottingham. So never any proper investigation into the reports of the child abuse and Beechwood and what happened to Mickey Summers or Melanie Shaw. They simply skate over it. And this pattern we're seeing across the country as local papers, well, they call themselves local papers, but in fact they're coming under the control of much bigger corporate interests. And if you wanted to follow that through, you would say, well, who owns those cooperative media interests? Well, it's going to be the very banks who are the focus of this particular case.
And it's exactly right, Brian. This is, you know, it's going on in every direction with the child stealing, the whistleblowing, every direction we're getting attacked. And unfortunately, you know, some of the public don't appear to have a pulse. They seem to be sleepwalking themselves into this, not realizing that it's coming for them. And these newspapers, they're prostitutes, as people say, and this is exactly what they are. They want to know the root causes of everything, why people have got dementia, why people have got are autistic, etc., etc. But when it comes to serious issues like this, they won't ask the question, and the question is why. And if they ask that question, they're supplied with the paperwork and they conveniently ignore it.
Indeed. And the other thing, of course, they do is they put in the nudges. So if we just bring up the Nottingham one back on screen, I just happened to notice this at the top of the little picture. It talks about Tom Crawford clashes, as if there was a major violent event there, which of course there absolutely wasn't. With a large number of people, although the Notts Post says 200, there was considerably more than that. But 99.99% of those present, it was peaceful. So this is a skew, it's a lie by the paper, and clearly designed to turn the public against this particular case. Well, perhaps that gives us the opportunity to move on to this one. And thank you very much for the person who highlighted this one. A Sky News report that a big company, Advent, they've got stakes in DFS, the property furniture company, and WorldPay. They are in line to take over the land registry operation, 1 billion. This is part of the main report. So it says that Advent is amongst other players who are looking at putting a bid in for the land registry. And this is fascinating. It says that the value of 1.2 billion has been recorded with a surplus of almost 100 million per year, well, 2012-13. But Mike, correct me if I'm wrong on this. This is a land registry simply doing its job as a government department, but it's making profit off people.
Well, you would think so. And just to give a bit more background to this, also mentioned in this article was the fact that the government now has a holding company for assets which are owned by the nation. And this holding company will hold assets that are in line for privatisation. So this was originally announced back in May last year, and this asset company arrangement was set up by the autumn, and it's called UK Government Investments, UKGI. It's part of the government's plan to deliver the biggest ever sale of public-owned corporate and financial assets. And those assets are exceeding £23 billion in real terms so far. Although this UKGI organisation is wholly owned by the Treasury, as we've mentioned before, when I asked the Treasury for some kind of information about which assets and the value of the assets that are being sold under this arrangement, the Treasury basically said, we don't know. So nobody seems to really know what's going on. And when you've got the situation that nobody knows what's going on, surely that's the situation where money gets diverted into directions it shouldn't otherwise be going.
Fraud, corruption, money laundering. And Guy, perhaps you'd like to come back in on this one, because really this is the evidence which supports your warning that people in the wider general public need to really wake up to what's happening here, because of course by the time the land registry is privatised in the mess which Mike's suggesting, anything is possible. We could have thousands, millions of homes stolen, and of course people have no way of getting to the truth as to what's really going on. Well,
land registry is the actual tool the government's using to asset strip everybody. And I advise everybody who's bought any properties, and if you familiarise yourself with what's supposed to be at land registry, and you start looking into the conveyancing of properties that you may have bought, you're going to discover that they don't support what's happened. And as I say, it's the tool that they're using against us. Now they're looking at selling the tool to probably alleviate themselves from liability any further. I don't know. But the whole thing is a con. Everything that's going on around us in every direction is a complete and total con.
It's a con, but it's planned. And if we just come back to this wonderful book by Oliver Letwin, here it is, Privatising the World, a study of international privatisation in theory and practice. And of course, where is Oliver Letwin at the moment? He is the man deep in the Cabinet Office bunker, driving David Cameron, the Conservative Party and the government. This is an open secret in Westminster now that David Cameron, he is the useless puppet. That's why they're happy for him to drift away to have his beer in Lanzarote. The man who is really controlling this whole country is Oliver Letwin, Rothschild man, of course, and he's simply been working from the bunker. So we've got Osborne selling what the public really owns. Why is he doing it? Well, Letwin is telling him, and Letwin has already told us, this book was published some years ago, Letwin is the guru of privatisation along the Rothschild route. So this isn't Tory policy, this is the international bankers' policy. By the time everything's privatised, they own the lot.
It's interesting that the press release which announced UKGI, the UK Government Investments Holding Company, mentioned that Rothschild was the main advisor for this. So Oliver Letwin, working for Rothschild's bank, and he writes a book, Privatising the World. Sometime later, he's within the cabinet that puts together a holding company which uses Rothschild as its advisor. It's a bit incestuous.
Well, it's obvious what's going on, Mike. This is subversion by corporate interests. And of course, we had the Goldman Sachs banker standing alongside George Osborne on budget day. So this is subversion. This is, in my view, criminal corporate interests now starting to really take control of the country and steal our property. But we've got more to come, I think.
Yeah. Okay, EU referendum then. Well, they're rolling out the usual suspects once again to try to re-inflame the dying embers of the Remain campaign. We'll come on to why that might be. And of course, all they're doing is threatening us. So Gus O'Donnell saying it's going to take 10 years for us to get out if we choose to leave. So, you know, what's the point in trying? And the Monetary Policy Committee also saying that, well, they're basically threatening us. If we leave the European Union, we're going to have the financial system mobilised to smack our bottoms, really, as naughty children. And they're going to attack the pound and destroy the economy, is what the Bank of England is saying. Now, we could say that the Chinese have demonstrated recently that that doesn't work. All you need is a determined government prepared to say no. Perhaps our current crop of politicians would inform that, but nonetheless, the threat is there. Well, the Telegraph here is pointing out that the House of Lords is warning Cameron against using these threats and the fear strategy. They're saying that it's going to drive people towards Brexit. And I think that's an interesting scenario. The question then is, does Cameron want us to leave? Well, in a certain sense, since there's nothing that he could say positive with regard to us staying within the European Union, he hasn't really got any choice but to make the threats. But nonetheless, does Cameron want us to leave? I don't think he does, but perhaps this gives us a clue to a strategy that's going on here, because, of course, Boris put in charge of the No campaign. Well, this is what he had to say a couple of weeks ago. There's only one way to get the change we need. Who is we? And that is to vote to go, because all EU history shows that they only really listen to a population when it says no. So is the strategy then to get us to vote no at Brexit so they can go back to the European Union and bully them a bit more? Perhaps, I don't know. I'm just throwing it out as a possibility. Of course, we've got to remember that a no vote in the referendum doesn't actually hold Cameron to anything. It's just people voicing an opinion, and he can take it or leave it. There's no legal requirement for him to follow that. It might be political suicide, but he's expendable, as we've already hinted at. But I just also want, before we leave this subject, to highlight this from 38 Degrees. And this, of course, is talking about the TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade Investment Partnership. They are saying this is a threat to our democracy. That is absolutely correct. They're saying that people should be standing up to say no. That's absolutely correct as well. But I would just say to anybody that is involved with 38 Degrees, or anybody that knows anybody that's involved with 38 Degrees, you've got to remember, as I've highlighted a number of times recently, you've got to remember that if you vote to remain in this referendum, you are saying yes to TTIP, because that is part and parcel of the deal. And so you have no right then, once you've given your consent in the referendum, to go back and say no to TTIP. So you better become aware of that pretty quickly and make a decision about how you're going to vote in this referendum. If you are against TTIP, you've got to say no.
Got to say no. And humour can be powerful, and I will smile because I was initially caught out by this one. Was circulating yesterday to do with rugby. Will the EU bench the Six Nations? And the key part of it was here that apparently the EU Minister for Approved Recreational Activities has been quoted as saying, we don't have nations anymore in the European state, we have regions. I repeat, if this so-called contest is allowed to continue, it will have to fall in line with EU directives concerning approved recreational activities. As things stand now, it certainly doesn't. So somebody taking a bit of humour and a look into the future and saying, well, we know what's coming. They're going to get rid of the nation states, and they're going to get rid of our rugby. And there's the EU Minister for Approved Recreational Activities. So whoever created this article did a good job, because they're spot on the money. And of course, that is where the EU wants to take us, which is to destroy nation states. This is what the use of refugees and immigration is all about. When you've destroyed the nation states, you can control the regions within a dictatorship, which is the EU. Well, happily, there is some progress on the ground, and we've recently interviewed Dave Barmby. If you haven't seen that interview, top left on screen at the moment is a little advert for the UK column and the EU, a corporatist racket. That's the video of the interview. But Dave Barmby and a group of others have set up the Independent Committee for Supervision of 2016 Referendum Procedures and Practices. A letter has gone to Jenny Watson, the Chief Counting Officer of the European Union Referendum Management Board in London. And essentially, they're saying that because the evidence is all there of vote rigging back in the days 1975 referendum for the EEC, because of that vote rigging, Dave Barmby and his team are extremely concerned. They're seeing the same thing happening now. So I'll just read you a couple of little bits from the letter which has gone to the Chief Counting Officer. It says, concerns regarding transparency and fairness of the forthcoming referendum on Britain's continued membership of the European Union, analysis of the conduct of the 1975 referendum on the continued membership of the then European Economic Community, revealed a number of questions over transparency and robustness of the procedures used to prevent vote rigging and fraud. Initial planning then was to transport all ballots from throughout the country to Earl's Court in London, where they would all be counted together. But only 5 weeks prior to this, plans were changed so that the ballots were counted regionally as well as at Earl's Court, creating a chaotic situation whereby opportunities for vote interference may have occurred. So that's the opening. And then this is another paragraph. It says, in response to these questions over the conduct of the 1975 referendum, the Independent Committee for Supervision of the 2016 referendum protocol has been established by a number of concerned citizens over the prospects for transparency and fairness for the upcoming referendum scheduled for the 23rd of June. ICRSPP, that's the organisation, the primary concern is the transparency of the counts and methodology of announcing them following the close of voting. The fear here follows from observations that the Electoral Commission's document setting out the practices, Part C, administering the poll, contains ambiguities that make it possible to be confident, that make it impossible to be confident that the count will be open and transparent to the public, and that the remain and leave figures will be announced locally immediately after the end of the local count. Now, we will see if we can make this letter available, but if you read the text carefully, what you will see is that the main concern is that the votes are going to be taken to a central location before anybody locally gets to hear their results. So in the election for an MP, for example, you see the results coming in from local areas, you know the feel. you're pretty sure the Conservative was going to get in. He does get in. Okay, that's all fine. In this case, no. The votes are all going to go to a central location, and then we're going to be told. I believe I saw vote rigging 2 elections ago, witnessed the box of ballot papers all coming out, folded exactly equal. Something seemed to be wrong. I think they're going to rig this vote, and Dave Barmby needs maximum support. Guy, give you the opportunity to come in on that one.
Well, all this stuff, it's past the buck with no accountability. And I mean, I think this is where we're going with all this, Brian, from what you said there. The nation states will end up being corporate states, and, they'll be buying and selling us like the cattle. This is what's going on. And, I mean, do we honestly trust them to not rig a vote? Be honest. I mean, do we trust them with anything, these people? I mean, I certainly don't.
Well, no, all elections are rigged in the chat, according to the chat box, and I think that's absolutely right.
Well, I just like the bit that it's been suggested we should ask the Russians whether they could come in to monitor the transparency of this EU referendum. I think I would vote for that, actually.
Yeah, start a petition.
Start a petition.
Right, economic news, and of course the main economic news of the day is that Tata Steel is selling the last British blast furnaces. If this infrastructure is sold and it's sold to some kind of asset stripping hedge fund, in fact, Britain potentially becomes the first Western nation to not have any capability for producing steel. Quite a staggering suggestion. So the danger, as was noted by the unions, is that it will be sold to an asset stripping private equity firm. Tata is complaining that the government has done nothing to help so far. And the unions, of course, fear that the government is going to do nothing now. Of course, the unions are also blaming China for this. That they're saying that the Chinese are dumping steel on the market well below market value. And of course, they're saying this is what's caused the problems with British steel. Now, of course, that's nonsense, or at least it's only a very small part of the story. Because at the same time that we've got stockpiles of steel in the world and we've got stockpiles of oil, as we've seen with the oil price, we also have stockpiles of coal. And so it just continues. The truth is that what we're seeing is a complete collapse of the real physical economy. It's a collapse of demand. The Chinese, as I've said so many times, aren't to blame for this. In fact, we are. Our economic policies are to blame for this. And the EU, of course, what's their plan? Well, their plan is called the Juncker Plan because half-President Juncker has produced a plan. It's the state of play of this plan, as they call it, is that 10.6 billion euros has been set aside, and that is then expected to generate a further 76 billion euros of private investment. Just to put that into perspective, that is 0.6% of the GDP of the European Union, so it's pretty insignificant. And to give an idea of how this is going to be distributed, Italy, for example, is going to get 1.4 billion euros, but then that is expected to create investments of 4.8 billion euros. And of course, these are only expectations. It's cloud cuckoo land, it's not reality. Germany is only going to get 455 million euros, and that they expect will produce 1.1 billion euros of investments, perhaps, maybe, if they're really lucky. Poland's going to get 19 million euros, nothing. And that's apparently going to create 658 million euros of investments. And so it goes on. So it's a nonsense plan. And there's not really much more to say about that.
Has this just been announced, Mike?
Yes.
So obviously it was designed to assist the EU stay in vote, isn't it? Presumably this is a little nudge to try and sweeten things.
No, I think they're just absolutely at a loss as to what to do, and they're trying to persuade everybody that they're doing something economically. Right. 315 billion euros of investment. The headline's even a lie because, of course, most of that money is coming from private sources, and it's not being provided by the EU at all.
Okay, well, let's have a look at this. I'm absolutely delighted. Somebody alerted the UK column to this. And I thought to myself, excellent, we've got people spot on. So somebody took a look at the heart of the Southwest. It's called a growth hub. It says, welcome to the Growth Hub, your access point to the support you need to start or grow your business. So the inference is always that before these things were there, nobody knew how to start a business or grow it. We got a bit more. The Growth Hub service, the heart of the hub, independent. Let's get some of this labelled. So it's independent diagnosis and referrals to existing business support services. We are the first point of contact. And when we get down to the bottom, we got another little organisation creeping in there, which is Peninsula Enterprise. So you say, okay, who are these people? Well, stay with it, because here's Peninsula Enterprise. And if we have a little look about them, it says we are positive about the future. We believe that we're entering into a new period of economic development. According to them, Mike, we're entering a new period of economic development, one that provides significant opportunities for growth and inclusion. Now, I was very interested by that language, the inclusion. And so where does Peninsula Enterprise come from? Well, remarkably, it's this company at the back of it, Serco. So we've got an independent service which says that up to 4,000 businesses can be supported within Serco's independent growth hub. I think what's going on here is a huge octopus, which is basically pulling everything together so that if you own a small business, one-man band, whatever it is, ultimately Serco is going to know all your information and details of your company. So I've brought George Osborne in here because on one hand we've got him selling off the state assets, but this is the other thing being set up, is that giant corporations like Serco are being brought into, what is it, quasi-public system. So what sort of people behind all of this? Well, this man, Steve Hindley, I think he worked with Midas Construction, or he was the boss, so a construction company. But he says that Peninsula Enterprise's extensive first-hand experience of working with a diverse range of businesses in the southwest area. So I have every confidence in their ambitions to deliver a robust service. So is this the government talking? Is this public sector or private sector? Political? We've no way of knowing. And then Chris Redding, the chief executive, he says we're delighted to be delivering the Growth Hub and look forward to working in partnership with business services across the heart of the Southwest to help businesses receive the support they need to develop and flourish. So we've seen businesses wiped out in Plymouth, all of the major dockyard businesses gone, but we've got this quasi-organisation which is all independent, but it's run by Serco. Can anybody explain this to me? Guy, can you explain it to me? Because it's very puzzling to me.
It's gangsters, isn't it? It's just gangsterism. This is what's going on. You know, we're dealing with gangs of all certain types and persuasions, and we don't know that they're operating. And this, you can see it, all the mealy-mouthed nonsense that they're writing, and you know, it's a con man's delight. This is, honest to God.
Well, let's add a bit more, because I was also pointed at this. Of course, it's the government programme, Innovate UK. And if you've got an incubator business, you need the government's help to help your idea grow. I think it's to help the government steal your idea. But this is part of it. So we've got Business Secretary Vince Cable announcing the appointment of Ruth McKernan as the new Chief Executive of Innovate. So we thought it'd be interesting to have a look at her. And here she is. Well, what is her experience? Well, it's with the big pharmaceuticals, Mike. So this is just the sort of person to help businesses of all nature. She's worked with Pfizer, and she's also been part of the Neuroscience Research Centre, Glaxo.
So she knows a lot about starting small businesses and scaling them up then?
Well, she knows about research in the drug industry, but the government thinks that this is exactly the woman to actually come in and run a whole Innovate thing. We say, who is this woman really? This is clearly more to it than meets the eye. But same sort of agenda. You've got the government and big business merging in with what was normally our world, where ordinary good people got on with their work and created businesses, and if they worked hard, they were successful. What's coming?
Well, what's coming? This article here in the Washington Post, I wanted to give award the Washington Post the State the Bleeding Obvious Prize. Because this is a new study which says that mass surveillance silences minority opinions, and they're saying a new study shows that knowledge of government surveillance causes people to self-censor their dissenting opinions online. The research offers a sobering look at the oft-touted democratizing effect of social media and internet access that bolsters minority opinion. And this study was published in Journalism and Mass Communication Quarterly, apparently. Why would we award the Washington Post the stating the Bleeding Obvious Prize? Because, of course, this whole notion is quite an old notion, and it's one of the sort of central tenets of 1984, isn't it? That mass surveillance is something which causes people to shut up, and that is the point of it.
Yeah, the bit that continues to puzzle me, Mike, though, of course, we've got the mass surveillance, but they just do not seem to be able to pick up on the paedophiles around Westminster. You can spend billions, but we can't detect our politicians who are involved or being blackmailed due to their involvement in the abuse of children. What the politicians can do, of course, is give our money away. And a very interesting article from the Mail, this was on Sunday, where the Mail had done a digging into where money was going. So this is all so-called overseas aid budget, helping terrorists, and a variety of other things. This is what they said: as Europe and Britain's migrant crisis has spiraled out of control, for example, a BBC Somali radio drama funded by the British taxpayer heard characters trading tips on how to become an illegal immigrant. 5 million of money went to a US think tank that spent 12 million on a new HQ. That's the HQ, the picture in the background, and it's the Global Centres for Development. So quite rightly, the Mail pointing out where is all this public money going, and they're being pretty direct, saying some of it's going to fund terrorism. And we picked up on this BBC Somalia radio drama because aside from palaces being built at 12 million with taxpayers' money, here we are, the famous charity that UK Column has been warning about, BBC Media Action, using public money to help change the whole political climate in Somalia. Subversion from the inside, paid by the taxpayer. And we know the story must be true because the Department for International Development has got so panicky, they've had to put up a bit on the internet saying that the media reports are all wrong and the government is going to set the record straight. Or not.
Or not. Right. Sorry, we'll just move on to this one because we're running out of time. So President Obama apparently is taking more steps to address the prescription drug abuse and heroin epidemic. Now, we've mentioned this a number of times over the last few weeks that the United States is suffering from a major heroin epidemic, and that epidemic is causing huge numbers of suicides right across the country. So Obama has decided to jump on the bandwagon and claim that he's doing something about it. And so what this White House press release says is today, as part of his efforts to escalate the fight against the prescription opioid abuse and heroin epidemic, the president will join individuals in recovery, family members, medical professionals, and law enforcement officials at the National Drug Abuse and Heroin Summit in Atlanta, Georgia. And so at the event, he was asked some questions and he was announcing what he was going to do about it. So what he was going to do about it was to increase access to key drug for medication-assisted treatment. That's apparently going to prevent opioid overdose deaths. So it's not going to do anything to stop people taking these drugs. It's only going to prevent overdose deaths. A Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration is going to be set up, and they're going to release another $11 million of funding, and that apparently is going to address all kinds of problems, and they're going to do something with Medicaid as well. So basically what they're talking about is treating symptoms, And here's more symptom treating, because this has just been announced that in New York, one area of New York at least, they're going to set up a site which is going to manage people's heroin use and make sure that they don't take overdoses and whatnot. So basically, we're treating symptoms here. And I think that what's going on here, Brian, is that people are being farmed. Governments could offer a real alternative, perhaps by giving people, I don't know, call me some kind of pie in the sky, blue sky thinker or something, but they might give them some kind of real productive, inspiring economic opportunities that might prevent people from taking drugs.
Yeah, well, you don't want to do the right thing, right?
They might give children some real educations that might inspire them or something. They might give society some culture or something, that isn't sort of all death based. But this death cult that we have running the world at the moment doesn't want to do that. They prefer to manage people's deaths, and that's really what's going on here. And why would they want to do that? Well, here's an article from last year in The Independent, which maybe gives us a clue, because the global money laundering centre is the City of London, Wall Street, for the drugs trade. This is the only thing that's keeping the financial system afloat at the moment, is heroin and opiates. And that's the reason why they would prefer to spend a little money managing people through their addiction and ultimate death, rather than actually do anything to prevent them becoming addicted in the first place.
And interesting, Mike, that the Independent can work this out, but MI6, MI5, GCHQ, Special Branch, Metropolitan Police,
Serious
City of
Fraud
London
Office.
City of London Police, Serious Fraud Office, none of those agencies are apparently capable of working out that the drugs are all being laundered through the City of London. Guy, just a very quick comment with an eye on the time.
Well, yeah, and through Afghanistan. So, I mean, we're living in some sort of Kafkaesque nightmare, aren't we, really? And we've just got to put a smile on and, keep pushing at it. So.
Absolutely right. Well, well done to Zero Hedge for this article, which was also sent in to us this morning. Thank you very much, because it does help in preparing the news. Refugee crisis using chaos to build power. And this article is really into the meat of the beast. It is saying that the refugee crisis, the immigration, all deliberately created in order to effectively help the creation of the supranational state, the European Union, the new world government. And down at the bottom, not surprisingly, it gives our old friend George Soros a mention as one of the key money men in the background stirring the pot. So interesting to see these people starting to pick up on it. But of course, everywhere we go and look, children are the issue.
Well, I thought this was a pretty cynical tweet for the Liberal Democrats to be sending out. Cynical, maybe he doesn't even come close to it. Do you think taking more refugee children is the right thing for Britain to do? Join us. Give the Liberal Democrats £1 to join the Liberal Democrats, because they are, of course, running the campaign to bring more of these children into the country. I just thought it was incredible that they were intending to raise money on the back of the suffering of Syrian children. But we've got to also remember that Tim Farron has to date not given any response to our challenge as to what is going to happen to these unaccompanied children once they do come to the United Kingdom. Will they disappear into the care system? Will they be trafficked into the sex trade? Will they end up on drugs? He doesn't want to tell us what he's going to do to make sure that none of those things happen. And as I said in this little article, this is out of the frying pan into the fire for these children, but it's all right so long as the Liberal Democrats get £1 each time somebody joins them.
It's just unbelievably
Disgusting.
callous, isn't it? And I can imagine that the person who created that little advert was actually laughing to that. They don't give a fig about the children. They don't care about their safety. So we'll make a bit of money off the side, or they move on to drugs probably. Guy, last 30 seconds from you. We're nearly at the end of today's news.
Well, who would have ever thought that the Liberal Democrats would have sold their soul for £1? I mean, really, truthfully. What more can we say, chaps? What more can we say?
No, it's all a bit obvious. Okay, well, Guy, thank you very much for joining us and giving us an update on Tom Crawford. Any notices? I don't think so today. We'll just say if you enjoy what we are doing and you'd like to support what the UK column is doing, please consider donating or taking out a subscription. We can only do what we do with your support, and we would like to do more. So if you haven't done that yet, please consider making a donation. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.